Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the Conservation Consensus. I am Casey Darling Niffen, Conservation Policy Director with the Florida Wildlife Federation. The Federation is in its 90th year this year, and our mission is to safeguard Florida's water, wildlife, and wild spaces by taking action today to prevent irreversible loss tomorrow. I just want to welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you to our wonderful panelists. Tonight, we are going to go over some new voter polling results conducted by FWF. We're going to talk about what Floridians expect from lawmakers this legislative session, and we're going to go over our 2026 legislative roadmap to protect wild Florida, including Florida Wildlife Federation's legislative priorities. I want to just introduce and welcome our panelists. We have Dr. Susan Carr, who is a Senior Conservation Project Manager at the Putnam Land Conservancy. Susan is a well-known conservation veteran who has worked for a variety of organizations over the last 30 years, including several land trusts and government agencies. She's intimately familiar with state and federal land protection programs and has facilitated thousands of acres of land protection. Her focus is on the Ocala to Osceola, or O to O, part of the Florida Wildlife Corridor. Thank you for being here, Susan. And we also have Jessica Finch. Jessica is a councilwoman, former mayor of Ocklawaha, and the community engagement coordinator for the St. Johns Riverkeeper. A primary focus of Jessica's role at the Riverkeeper is on the restoration of the natural flow of the Ocklawaha River to reunite Silver Springs, the Ocklawaha, and the St. Johns. As a community member in Ocklawaha and former owner of the Swanee Valley Campground and Ocklawaha Lodge and Resort, Jessica is keenly aware of the importance of rivers to the economy and quality of life of the local community there. So thank you so much for being here, Jessica.
Thank you for having me.
At the end of our discussion tonight, we'll have a question and answer from our audience, like always. So please, if you have any questions, if you have anything that you would like our panelists to answer at the end, please drop your questions into the comments as we're talking. So settle in. We are going to start off with some very recent polling data that FWF has acquired. Most of our audience who's here tonight is thankfully supportive of our conservation priorities, but Florida Wildlife Federation really wanted to know what Floridians and specifically voters, how they felt about conservation and the conservation land programs that the state runs at large. So we have some results of that polling. Just very quickly, we worked with a survey expert, Dr. Stephen Neely from the University of South Florida, to ensure that we had a representative sample for this and proper survey design. So we really appreciate those efforts from Dr. Neely. And I'm excited to share what we found in this survey with you all. Some of our key findings, as we all know in this community, but hopefully we can feel a bit bolstered to know that Floridians and voters specifically rank conservation as a top priority. This is across party lines, across all demographics that we were asking about conservation priorities. And on top of that, when compared to some of our other, can you go back just one slide for us in the background? We have our wonderful team of communications folks in the background changing slides. Thank you. When we compare this to some of these other big issues that we know Floridians care a whole lot about, protecting Florida's land, water, and wildlife ranks almost highest, right next to lowering the cost of living. So we have 97, almost 98% of registered Floridian voters saying that this is a top priority when they think about the future of Florida and how our legislators are passing laws in our state. So we have strong support from Floridian voters. We also ask them when they think about conservation lands, do they expect those lands to be protected forever? Do you expect when you have a state park, a state forest, something that you love to go and recreate, do you expect that those lands are protected forever? And we know that we've had some examples where maybe that has come into question recently. And we've seen, again, overwhelmingly across party lines, that Floridians do expect that these lands, conservation lands, are forever. So that we'll dive a little deeper into our priority of defending conservation lands this legislative session. But I just wanted to share that with this audience so you know that you're not alone in thinking that these conservation lands should be protected forever, and that we should continue to advocate for such. So the other finding that was not surprising to me, but really helped me recognize the importance, was that Floridians really support our land acquisition programs at the state level. So Florida Forever is our premier land acquisition, conservation land, and recreation land acquisition program. And Floridians, by and large, said that they support funding that program. They support using the funds that we have dedicated to that program to go to land acquisition. And that was really a result that we were hoping to see, and we did. So across party lines, again, across demographics, we saw that Florida Forever and conservation acquisition was supported. So we are in the process of wrapping up a report that will include all of those survey results. We hope that folks on this, tuning into this live stream, will take a look. If you are interested in that, please sign up on the link that we are about to put into the comments, or the link that you'll see on your screen in just a moment. And that report, again, is going to highlight the return on investment from that blueprint for Florida conservation, Florida Forever. It's going to showcase conservation success stories, and it's going to outline what's at risk if we don't properly dedicate those funds and meaningful funding towards land conservation in the state. All right, so take a look in the chat. You should see that in the next few minutes. It seems like maybe we're having a little bit of difficulty putting that link up on the screen, but please check out the chat, and got it? It's in the comments, so you can sign up for that there. So moving on to our first priority, Florida Forever. We just talked about how overall the Floridians and registered voters in the state support this program. Florida Forever is a foundational program. It's decades. We have a decades-long legacy of protecting land in Florida, protecting land for water, for wildlife, and for that public access that we all enjoy so much when we go out to recreate. Thank you. Yep. Okay. So this was our slide for showing that 85% of Floridians support conservation, and making sure that we have additional funding to protect our ecosystems that we care about so much. So Susan, I want to give you the opportunity, if you are able to share from your land trust perspective, how does Florida Forever function as a catalyst? How does it compare, how does it, function to support our land conservation and recreation lands acquisition programs? And what happens when maybe we don't see the funding that it needs, like we did last session when the funding was drastically cut?
Sure. Yes. Thank you. Well, as you mentioned, it really is the primary source for funding for, very importantly, the purchase of land outright. That's called a fee land acquisition in our world, but that's when you're just buying land, and buying conservation easements. Now, And I think all in Florida Forever and its precursors have been have funded a couple million acres of conservation lands in Florida, which really comprise a lot of the state parks, the state forests that we know. Also, FWC owned land, wildlife management areas, and a lot of the lands that we know and enjoy today. So Florida Forever funds a combination of land acquisition outright, and it also purchases conservation easements. This is a really important point because sometimes when everything gets rolled up and you just see a big number for all of the conservation programs, you may not realize that, you know, they're not all the same. They're different. The other big program that's getting a lot of funding these days is the Rural and Family Lands Protection Program. It buys only easements, conservation easements, and really only conservation easements on agricultural lands. So when you see that big number, you know, the devil is in the detail, because if Rural and Family Lands is getting a bulk, that's only for buying conservation easements on private lands. So again, Florida Forever is the only way at the state level, except for some more minor programs, to buy lands outright to protect environmentally sensitive lands, watershed lands, and that sort of thing. So it really is the best program we have for that. It also has a landscape conservation scale focus. It is also designated in the legislation for the Florida Wildlife Corridor, which I expect most people have heard about. In that legislation that says the state of Florida shall endeavor to build a wildlife corridor of a string of public and private conservation lands, Florida Forever is the primary vehicle to do so. It says it right there in the bill. Oh, great. Yeah. So you see Florida Forever has a very much a landscape scale focus. The yellow bits on the map are areas that Florida Forever has deemed important for conservation. And you can see it aligns very well with the conservation of the Florida Wildlife Corridor, which are in the gray bits. And then, of course, another really huge point about Florida Forever is that it's objective, it's transparent, and it is based in science. So there's been decades of work going in to figure out where the best areas of Florida are for conservation. And a lot of that is shown in the yellow on the map here. So it's, there's a prioritization to it. You know, it's not just any land that comes available or something like that. It really is focused on something that's derived from a lot of objective science data and mapping. So what if we don't have it? So of course I'm in the business of working with Florida Forever. It is a willing selling. This is another important point I just want to make. It is a willing seller program. It only is going to buy land and conservation easements from willing sellers. It is not condemnation, eminent domain, or anything like that. So as you can see, it takes a while to find willing sellers that are in those appropriate areas for conservation and cultivate all that and get projects done. So in my business, every project is, I don't know, I don't think I've ever done anything in less than a year and a half. So it's like 2 years plus. So you can see these are sort of a lot goes into it. When Florida Forever gets defunded, or even when there's a lot of volatility, you can see it throws a lot of static into that process. And so think about it. It takes years to do a project. So you need some continuity of the program. Also, the state staff, the DEP folks that run the program, you know, you need a full staff of highly experienced people. And when their funding is volatile, then, you know, that gets kind of messed up. So, so if we don't have it, and I'm also saying the threats are, and then, or if there's a lot of volatility in the program, you see the whole thing is threatened. And our big tool for building this conservation corridor and for buying fee land, lands outright, as well as conservation easements. And with the one program that really is focused on environmentally sensitive protection of natural resources. I probably said enough about that.
Thank you, Susan. No, it's so important. I just want to highlight a couple of points. you know, when you say we are buying this land outright, when we are buying this land in fee, you know, we all use that jargon sometimes, but what that means to our audience is those are the public lands that you can go and recreate on. Those are the lands that turn into our state parks, our state forests, our wildlife management areas. Those are the lands that we all know and love and are able to access. When we have a conservation easement, you know, those are helpful, and those keep those lands protected as well, but we don't have access as the public to those lands. So it's a really big distinction when it comes to how we enjoy wild Florida. And you saw from that map, all of those connected parcels, those dots on the map, so to speak, they create that corridor. They also overlap areas where there are springs, coastal areas with estuaries that, you know, protects water quality. There's wildlife corridors, as we said. That's you know, a big underpinning of the prioritization, and it also, you know, provides flood resilience and climate resilience, because the more protected land we have in the state, the more we have to buffer from some of those big disasters that Florida is prone to. So it's such an important priority for us, and meaningful, consistent, predictable funding, just like you said, is what we will keep asking for every single legislative session.
I'm glad, if I can make I'm glad you made that point, because that's really, so the buying land outright, absolutely. That's the land that we can access. And there's probably a whole nother webinar about conservation easements versus fee or buying land outright. But it also, we spend a lot of time looking at state parks and state forests. Sometimes they're discontinuous, or they have holes in them, in holdings and stuff like that. Florida Forever is the way to improve the integrity of our existing parks and forests. It's really the way. So when you don't have that, you are actually not safeguarding what we already have.
Yeah, it's such a good point. So let's say we get everything we want. We get strong, predictable, meaningful funding in this legislative session from lawmakers and in the future. What will that do? How will that strengthen the corridor? And how does that support our second priority, which is Ocklawaha River restoration? How do those things kind of tie in together? Can you give us your perspective, Susan?
Oh, with the river, you mean strong conservation funding for the Ocklawaha River? Yeah, well, we do work a lot to try to acquire lands around Rodman Reservoir and the river. Should things, most of it actually is in public ownership, fortunately. And the Ocklawaha Reservation is right in the middle of the O2O wildlife corridor, which is one of the critical linkages of the overall Florida corridor. So of course, if that was restored, that would really help the integrity of the Florida wildlife corridor itself. So yeah.
Thank you. Absolutely. And it's such a good point. You know, that land surrounding the pool and surrounding where the Ocklawaha River is to be restored, hopefully is to be restored, it's mostly protected land. It's almost all protected land, thanks to local land trusts like Putnam Land Conservancy for doing years, decades of important conservation work. And really our legacy of funding land acquisition in Florida has brought all of those lands surrounding that area into permanent conservation protection. So I want to move on to our second priority. As you all probably heard, it is to restore the Ocklawaha River. And today was just an absolutely wonderful day to have that be our priority. We have Jessica here who attended some committee meetings during legislative session, and she is going to give our viewers, Jessica, if you don't mind, give our viewers who may not know about Ocklawaha River restoration or the history, can you tell us a little bit why it's important and what's been lost over the years through the fragmentation and the damming of this river?
Absolutely. So this all started well before actually well before it actually started, and you could see physical signs of the dam or the Cross Florida Barge Canal being dug. I guess it started, early in the 1930s. The discussion began. It may have even began before that, but it was enacted in the late 60s. They started on the Atlantic side and also on the Gulf side, and the idea was to utilize the St. Johns River and then the Ocklawaha and cut a path across Florida, and primarily for uh, business purposes, oil probably. Some of you may have watched, the little Matt Keen's video about River Be Damned. Very informative. So what happened is it was abandoned, and Richard Nixon back in the early 70s, I believe it was 72, halted the work. They knew it was an environmental disaster for Florida, and it was halted. But here we are left with these two remnants that were started, and we're still in the situation of the Cross Florida Barge Canal on the Willaca side. I'm not sure what it's actually called on the other side. Probably the same thing. I mean, they don't have the Rodman Reservoir that we have. So I first got to know about the Ocklawaha because I lived in Willaca. I moved to Willaca in early 2004, and the town of Willaca, where I lived, is directly across from the mouth of the Ocklawaha. It is also the first downstream community from the dam. So if there was any sort of dam failure, Willaca would be the first to be affected. So I began to, I loved going out on the Willaca. The lower Ocklawaha is just absolutely gorgeous. It's probably what the rest of the Ocklawaha looked like at some point. I mean, they were logging trees, but a lot of the old trees have grown back. So it's a gorgeous thing. It's time to reconnect the Silver River, Ocklawaha, and the St. Johns. The St. Johns, since 2004, I've noticed myself being on the river. I had a riverfront business for almost 20 years. I lived on the river. It's been in decline. There's a lot of different reasons, but I believe, and scientists that we work with believe, that the restoration of the Ocklawaha River, adding that influx of cooler, clearer water to the St. Johns, would actually improve the health of the St. Johns River. We're facing disappearing eelgrass beds, increased turbidity, persistent algae blooms that we didn't see to the extent that we're seeing now. So restoring the Ocklawaha is going to be a huge step forward for the St. Johns River, and also for the Ocklawaha. I mean, it's the way it was intended to be. It's right now, it has to be drawn down every 3 to 6 years, depending on how they decide to schedule it. And a natural ecosystem, you don't have to kind of do that same maintenance. So I'm excited about today, and I'm sure you're going to ask me some questions about that, but I'm excited about what happened today. It's the first time I've been to committee meetings, and I actually got to speak, which was kind of nice. And everything was approved unanimously in the two committees that I attended, House and Senate. Just an exciting day for us. We are very hopeful. This is the first time this process has ever gotten to this point. Last year, there were some, an appropriation was put into the budget, but there were never bills filed. To see this actually in process and see the progress that has been made is just tremendous for me.
I fully agree. So I just want to highlight one of the things that you said, Jessica. You talked about the eelgrass coming back into the system. For those who don't know, eelgrass is a really important submerged aquatic vegetation, and you could think of it like seagrass in marine systems. It provides this amazing habitat for fish. It improves the fishery, it improves recreational fishing opportunities. So when you have the decline of eelgrass, what always comes with it is the decline of fishing and available fish and available habitat and food for those fish that live there. So that's such an important part, and that's why these bills that I'm going to talk about in a second are so important, and not only restoring this this natural system back to how it once was, and so that it can function as a natural system, but it also strengthens fishing and recreation, and it, as we were talking about before, it connects and opens up more of the Florida wildlife corridor, which is so important for our wildlife species to be able to migrate throughout the state. So Senate Bill 1066 and House Bill 981 were filed this year. They are aiming to advance the restoration as the Northeast Florida Rivers, Springs, and Community Investment Act. And these bills are, like Jessica said, very exciting. They hit their first committee stop in both the House and the Senate today. Great discussion. Jessica, what do these bills mean from an ecological and community standpoint? Can you tell us a little bit more about what they would do?
Well, the previous talk has always been about restoration, which is, of course, the number one goal. We want to obviously see that. However, these bills both incorporate a couple of other aspects. So they're called the 4 Rs. I think you might mention those, or those might have been mentioned in something that I was looking at. So restoration is, of course, the first R, which is restoring the Ocklawaha flow to the St. John's, which will also then connect Silver. It'll connect the three of the rivers back together, because St. John's has been missing that. It still gets some flow through the spillway, but it doesn't get what it would actually get if they were connected. So that's the first R. The second R is revitalization. So there's not only a talk of restoring the Ocklawaha, but this is a multi-pronged approach that is going to serve the community. So a long time, the community, specifically Putnam and Marion, are the reservoir, the impoundment, the pool, whatever you want to call it, sits between Putnam and Marion. They share about half, each has about 50%, close to it. The residents in those counties are concerned that, taking away this is going to cause them economic harm. So this bill provides pathways for economic help for these communities. So there's about 25 million, I think, that is slated in this bill for local communities, and it will be typically done, it appears, through a grant style program for the communities to apply. So specifically Willaca, because I was very familiar with how this worked, is Willaca has a riverfront plan, a vision that was put together through the Northeast Florida Regional Council. Willaca could potentially apply for some funding to see that come to fruition. I know that there is increased, and this is another R, is recreation. So there are other projects out there that Putnam County wants to work towards, which is additional boat ramps, things like that. So recreation is the third R. And one that is very near to my heart is resiliency. And that's specifically public safety and opening up wetlands for improved public safety. I mean, wetlands, opening up the Ocklawaha, the restoration of the Ocklawaha will also restore about 7,500 acres of wetlands. And these are natural wetlands, because right now those wetlands are underneath this pool. The purpose of a wetland is to provide flood storage and storage for water that has no place to go because of excessive rain or, whatever causes it. But right now, when you have permanently flooded wetlands, they're not serving their purpose. So this was never used for flood storage. It's never been used for electric power. It's never been used as a drinking water source. And there are reasons for that. I mean, it's not a great system for drinking water. They even say that a restored Ocklawaha and St. John's, the two connected, you would get better water quality if you did that method rather than relying on the Rodman Pool for water. So opening up the wetlands, allowing that water to have a place to go will actually improve the resiliency of the area by providing for better flood control. So it seems counterintuitive to say that the dam does not, provide, everybody thinks, well, it's holding all of this water back. Yes, but the dam is created to unnaturally hold billions of gallons of water back. It is actually creating the risk for the downstream communities. So if the river was allowed to flow freely, those wetlands would take the excess water, and then the water would flow down as it was intended to go. So there's so many parts of this that it's I'm sure I'm I'm sure I'm over talking, but there's so many parts to this, and it's so exciting to see all of these things that could come together, and the benefits to this are so extensive that I just am hoping that Florida finally gets it right. I really hope that this is the year for it. Anyway.
Absolutely. And we are championing that as well. I know during committee, there was some remarks today and they just stuck with me, especially with how you were explaining those forested wetlands that are right now unnaturally drowned out by the pool. Florida is not new to restoration projects, right? We have some of the largest in the country, in the world. We have Everglades restoration that's now 25 years in. We have the restoration of the Kissimmee River that was just completed. And both of those got mentions during that committee meeting, which I thought was just wonderful, because this is another example of where there once used to be these winding rivers that could expand and contract with natural systems and seasonal changes in water. We have blocked it. And anytime we've done that in Florida, it has caused downstream problems. So that restoration is so important. And we are so excited to use this legislative session as that critical window to get this passed and finally take a first step towards restoring the Ocklawaha. I'll just mention that another thing that the bill does is it brings the community back into that decision making. So it creates an advisory panel made up of community members so that they can really lead this effort and this plan for restoration.
Totally agree with that. I mean, that's one thing that these communities that are concerned, Putnam and Marion, I mean, it puts them back in the driver's seat to decide where they want this funding to go and be a part of the process. This is huge. I always told folks in Willaca, decide where you want to go and let's move that forward. And this Putnam County has that same opportunity. Don't let someone necessarily come in and tell you how it's going to be done. You decide, make the effort and the changes that you need to see so that you're actually in the driver's seat, and you can decide how you want your community to look. So they can decide what recreation projects they want to spend money on. I mean, it's not going to be left to Tallahassee. It's going to be left to the local communities, which is just amazing to me.
Awesome. You also mentioned that every several years there's something called drawdown, and that is a process that is used to basically flush out that pool and get rid of some of the invasive aquatic vegetation that's in there. So it kind of gets choked up at the mouth, and they will draw it down to remove the invasive aquatics. And that is happening right now. One of the other benefits of drawdown is that it can show you what a restored Ocklawaha can look like. And we have a photo up right now. It may look a little eerie because you've got all of these cypress, remnants of cypress trees that used to thrive there. But that is just a reminder of what this area could look like with the restoration plan. These cypress trees will start to sprout and regrow once you give basically Mother Nature the opportunity to do that, it will come back. So the drawdown is happening right now. It's a really wonderful time to go check out the Ocklawaha River, and the Federation is so happy to have some boat tours going, and please check out our blog post if you're interested in seeing what restoration could look like through the drawdown. That should be in the comments for you to click that link in just a few moments as well. Thank you so much, Jessica, for sharing everything, all of your, community knowledge and your tight-knit perspective from the community right there that will be most affected.
Thank you.
So our third priority, and definitely not the least important, is to defend our public land. So we talked about in the beginning of our live stream how conservation lands are meant to be forever, and most Floridian voters think the same thing. We also heard from Susan, and we talked about just all of the effort that goes into acquiring conservation lands in the first place. So in that vein, we really have to protect what we've already conserved. And so that's why our third priority, defending public lands, defending the conservation lands that we already have in existence, is so important. This allows us to keep our access for recreation. It protects the habitat that those conservation lands provide, and it also supports local economies and communities, just like we heard surrounding the Ocklawaha. So we were so excited to see the State Parks Preservation Act passed last session. And we remain vigilant to any of these land swaps or sales of conservation land that do not allow for public input, that aren't going through a transparent process. And in May of last year, we had another instance of one of these situations happening. There was a proposal last May, if you remember, for a swap of 600 acres in the Ocklawaha River Wildlife Management Area. This is in Northeast Florida, and it raised alarms for all of us statewide. This was on the heels of the Great Outdoors Act, Great Outdoors Initiative, and thankfully, we had very engaged Floridians come out and say, we want this land to remain protected. The land that was offered in this swap was fragmented across different counties. It wasn't the intent of the legislation that they were using at the time for this land swap to go forward, for that to be the way that it was carried out. And we had some very engaged lawmakers in that area who committed to making some necessary fixes in the legislative session. So here we are, 2026 legislative session. And again, we just want to thank the grassroots supporters out there for, they were the reason that this application was removed from consideration. And it really shows the importance of the community's role in making sure that these inappropriate land sales and swaps don't happen. And it exposed some of the vulnerabilities that we have in the law. So in response, these very engaged lawmakers, who we are very grateful for, Senator Mayfield and Representative Kendall, have filed a bill called Conservation Lands, Senate Bill 546 and House Bill 441. And these bills, again, they're a result of the community coming out and saying that this shouldn't be able to happen. This shouldn't be able to happen without my voice being heard in the process. So these bills aim to strengthen protections for state conservation lands and to increase transparency. If you all remember, in both the Great Outdoors Initiative and in this Ocklawaha land swap, we had 1 week to prepare for these things coming before a decision-making board, which was the Acquisition and Restoration Council. There were some other land swaps that kind of went in a different direction, and they went to the Board of Trustees first. And again, limited time to engage the public before they were at their decision-making point. So these bills will require a 30-day advance notice for anything that's going to go before that Acquisition and Restoration Council, or ARC, or the Board of Trustees for a land sale or swap. It also requires state-owned land exchanges to have appraisals, and it asks for clear public statements and transparency as to why those lands are no longer needed for conservation purposes. And that's really important because we have constitutional protections in the state of Florida for conservation lands. They are not to be sold without if they still have a need for conservation. So we really need to make sure that those benefits are real and realized by the general public. Sometimes those swaps and surplus lands can be beneficial, but we need to have the opportunity as the engaged Floridians that we are to look over those details and to have our voices be heard in each instance. So it also extends that transparency to water management districts who also hold a lot of public conservation land, and we are grateful that they do. So we are thrilled to have that bill moving through the state legislature. Susan, Jessica, I know this isn't directly in your line, but I'm sure you can agree that protecting our existing conservation lands is so important.
Absolutely. All fits together.
I'm muted. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just like the sort of trying to defend from all different angles. And I mean, as a practitioner with this stuff, I'll tell you one thing. I mean, maybe this is kind of a secondary effect, but when you're trying to work with landowners to sell something to the state of Florida, and this is what's going on with the state lands, it really puts a dampening effect even on, you know, getting willing sellers or people to engage. It's amazing. The pickleball court thing and this Ocklawaha River thing has just like really had a lot of unintended effects, I think. So I like this bill about increasing the transparency because I was around when that was, and if you looked at the law, you know, the devil's always in the detail. And I started looking at the rules and everything for taking something to the Acquisition and Restoration Council, and it was 1 week, and it was like a Friday afternoon, and that's when they scheduled a whole new meeting for this with 1 week notice, and really caught a lot of people by surprise. But it's amazing how people motivate. I think over that weekend, I had somebody, an agency person, said they had 7,000 emails, you know, like on Monday about it. So yeah, so transparency. The other thing is, I remember with this one, it wasn't real clear who the entity was that's proposing the swap. That was all clouded under a bunch of LLCs and that sort of thing. And I'm hoping that this tightens up, that there's a lot of apples to oranges kind of trades proposed, where this is obviously some highly desirable coastal property. And the trade lands were, if you look at just pure acreages, oh, it's like a 5-to-1 trade. But you got to look below that, right? It's always their timberlands somewhere completely different in the state, just completely different area, different habitat, you know, so obviously not fulfilling whatever those Ocklawaha River lands were purchased for in the first place, you know, apples to oranges kind of thing. So yeah.
Absolutely. Such a good point. You know, just looking at the acreage does not always give you the full picture. And you know, the wildlife that utilize a marsh versus wildlife that utilize a longleaf pine forest are going to be very different, right? So it's not always just that that comparison of acreage. You have to look at the habitat types, who lives there. And also, like we've said over and over again during this hour, the meaning to the community. And that is an area that is so meaningful to the local community. And that's why they showed up. They said, we love our recreation lands here. We love experiencing this place, and we don't want to see it go. So we appreciate all of you out there who are engaged on these things and are following along. 30 days public notice gives folks like us at the Florida Wildlife Federation and the Putnam Land Conservancy and Reunite the Rivers and St. John's Riverkeeper, it gives us the time to communicate these things to our supporters so that you have the chance to come out and make your voice heard. So that's really important, and we're thrilled to see it. And we'll be championing that throughout the session. So again, just to reiterate, FWF's priorities, number one, we want to fund conservation. We need that funding for land acquisition programs like Florida Forever, whose funding was severely cut last legislative session. As Susan talked to us about, we really need that consistent funding to make sure that that program can continue into the future and continue to protect lands that we all enjoy. We're also working to restore the Ocklawaha River. We've had some great early momentum in the session. We hope to keep that going. And again, thank you so much, Jessica, for being there today to share with committee members and lawmakers why this is so important to pass this session. And then defending our conservation lands, defending our public lands that are already in existence. And I know that that is something that we have lawmaker support. And as we saw with our survey, we have registered voters in Florida who think that that is really important as well. So I just want to thank our panelists so much for being here with us tonight. I want to turn this over to any questions that we've gotten from our audience. I want to make sure that we have the opportunity. If you have not yet asked a question, please feel free to drop that into the chat, and we will see if we can have one of our panelists or myself answer it. But just to get us started, something that I hear all the time is, well, this is all great, but what can I do? How can I help? So many people out there care about these things. We saw that the majority of Floridians from our survey results are championing restoration. They are championing conservation and would like to see these programs funded. How can they help? What can they do? And I will kick that over to you, Susan, and then you, Jessica.
Oh my goodness. Well, 10 things like this, get educated, I guess. It's amazing how, like I keep saying, the devil's in the details. So if you care about this stuff, kind of look below the surface. And we haven't even mentioned like the things that are other threats, even in this legislative session, like selling off lands subject to an agricultural easement that are already in public ownership, selling them to the private sector. So just learning about these sorts of things and making phone calls and writing letters. I got to say, I guess maybe I'm getting kind of cynical, but the public outcry about the Ocklawaha River swap and the development of state parks was amazing, and it seemed to work. So I know those are sort of like these hyper urgent things that come up, and it's harder to kind of study this more, I don't know, more mundane stuff or whatever, but I guess it's important, especially like these bills that are procedural or about, process and transparency. Well, that's why, fortunately we're in Florida and we do have process and transparency with land conservation.
Absolutely. And such a good point. Make those calls. If this is the issue that speaks to you most loudly, make those calls. Let your the folks in Tallahassee who represent you, let them know how you feel. And then they can take that into consideration on these committees and when they vote on the floor as well. Jessica, how about you? What do you think? What's the single biggest way that folks watching tonight can help?
So just generally speaking, I'm going to echo Susan's point, is be engaged. Engagement has stopped just in the last, I guess it's been last year or so, it has stopped some major attacks on things that we consider a part of our lives and we would have never imagined might be taken from us. So being engaged is huge. You can engage, there's so many ways. Online is, of course, very popular right now. There's other ways too, calls, emails, as you're suggesting. There's so many good things that can happen and so many bad things. So be engaged on both sides. So support what is good and what is moving forward in that direction, and then oppose the opposite, which is, bad and, things that shouldn't be, like we've discussed. You guys have discussed some of that earlier. So be engaged, number one. Specifically for Ocklawaha restoration, would you, I mean, is that something that we can talk about specifically, how to help with that? Or is this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. How can people help to support Ocklawaha restoration?
So that, of course, Ocklawaha Restoration, there's a website called Reunite the Rivers. Of course, that's the Silver St. John's and Ocklawaha in the middle. And there is a pledge there that you can sign. It only takes a couple moments. It doesn't ask a lot, and you can opt in to get emails from us, and we'll kind of, we periodically give updates as we have new information. There will be an update going out about these committee meetings. And then maybe there's an event you want to attend in person. Maybe there's a point that we need to be somewhere, showing, waving in support of this. There might be an opportunity at some point that people could participate. And they can always participate by contacting the House or Senate and their local legislators.
Wonderful, thank you. And Susan, more specifically, how can people support things like Putnam Land Conservancy and local land trusts and the work that actually goes into, and maybe you can speak to that, the work that goes into acquiring new conservation lands?
Oh, sure. Well, visit our website. There's three or four land trusts just in North Florida. So, just visit our website, see what our events are. Putnam Land Conservancy has an event coming up on February 21st at First Magnitude Brewery in Gainesville. So come out and check that out. Rally for Land Conservation. Of course, you can donate money, time, give us a call, see how you can help. A lot of what we do is just a lot of like mapping and real estate and stuff like that. It's not super, exciting or anything like that. But just, I guess land trusts are just so local and regional focused. So if you really care about a certain area, like in our case for Putnam Land Conservancy, despite our name, we work throughout North Florida, but particularly in Putnam, Clay, Marion, that area. If that's your area, then yes, by all means, contact us. If you're up in Jacksonville, there's North Florida Land Trust. So just find out who your local land trust is. And we don't do the level of advocacy that you do. We're not really an advocacy, but we are just trying to get the work done. So especially if you're interested in the practitioner part of this, how land conservation gets done, how do we find people? That's another one. If you know willing landowners, or if you are a landowner interested in conservation options for your property, by all means, contact us. So we're always looking for that.
I'm so glad you said that. That's what I was thinking. So much of this is just forging relationships and having that trust. And it's not a surprise that they are called land trusts, right? You are in the business of making those relationships to secure those deals. So if you have, friends who are curious about the Florida Forever program and are interested in becoming a willing seller, that's something that your local land trust can help you pursue as an option, and we would all benefit for it, right? So that's wonderful. Thank you so much to both of you for sharing those tangible ways that folks can stay engaged and help move these priorities forward. Very quickly, we only have a couple minutes left, but I wanted to just ask you if you both could share a place in Florida that reminds you of why this work matters. So often, especially during session, we get into the nitty-gritty policy details, and it's really important to remember what connects us back to these places that we're trying to protect. So it doesn't have to be related to anything we talked about tonight, but where's your place that you remember why you do this work?
Oh my gosh. Jessica, you want to go first?
I'm going to say the obvious answer for me. I mean, I grew up on a river. I grew up on the Swanee River, on the Ichetucknee River. Those are two very, very special places for me because I grew up and I lived there for many years. But I'm gonna also talk about the Ocklawaha, and I know that sounds like the given, but it is such a special place. When I first moved to Walaka, um, had an old boat, and every single night almost after the work was done, head out on the boat, enjoy the sunset, turn off the lights, listen to the sounds. It's such a wild and scenic river. Um, it's old Florida, and I'm very connected to that old Florida. I mean, I've lived in White Springs, I've lived in on the Swanee further south. I mean, I just love old Florida. So old Florida to me is how I feel connected.
Mhm. That's cool. I'm the same sort of thing, but more on the upland side because I just really like longleaf pines, sand hills, and that sort of thing. So, like Goldhead State Park is, I think, one of our oldest state parks, and it's just an example of. So it's been around for a while, and I think the people there are doing a great job of managing it. They burn a lot and everything, and there's some old growth longleaf pine there. It's not red. They're not like redwoods or anything. They're not super obvious, but it's just an example of our park service that has, had a piece of land for a long time with great management. Now that's old Florida, and yeah, I just like and go for tortoise habitat and the uplands. So yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much again. If anyone in our audience would like to engage more with Susan's work or Jessica's work, please follow Putnam Land Conservancy and the St. Johns River Keeper. We also put the link to the Reunite the Rivers website up for a moment, and we can put that in the chat as well. Please stay engaged. And then on behalf of Florida Wildlife Federation, I just want to thank you, Susan and Jessica, for taking time to be with us today. This was an incredible conversation, really enjoyed your perspective. And if you have not connected with the Florida Wildlife Federation thus far, please make sure you sign up for our monthly newsletters. It's certainly the best way to stay updated. We have action alerts if those, like we talked about, if those tricky land swaps come up again, we've got action alerts, and we will likely have more throughout the legislative session to give folks the opportunity to support some of these great bills that are moving forward. And then, of course, updates for live streams like this one. If you enjoyed some of what we were talking about in the beginning and want to be updated on our survey results and receive the report that we are compiling that supports our Florida Forever land acquisition program, please sign up for that in the link in the comments. And on behalf of Florida Wildlife Federation, another huge thanks to our panelists, every one of you who have tuned in. Thank you so much. As we leave tonight, I just want to encourage all of you to stay engaged, to speak up for wildlife and the places that matter most to you. Thank you for your support, and thank you for being with us this evening.
Thanks, Casey.
Take care.
Thank you.